Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sarnia Police Service Board open meeting for Thursday, June the 26th. And I'll just mention that Board Member Sebastian sends her regrets and Board Member Ash joins us online. So we'll begin our meeting with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that this land on which the Sarnia Police Service operates is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. It is through the connection of the Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, water, and air that we recognize the unique cultures, traditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect for the environment that sustains all life, protecting the future and for those generations to come. And this being June, I would also just recognize that last week we observed National Indigenous Peoples Day. I'll ask if there's any declarations of conflict of interest among the board for the meeting today. Seeing none, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Board Member McRoberts and Board Member Ash, all those in favor? That's approved. And then we have one set of minutes from our May 22nd meeting. So a motion to approve. Board Member Gillis and Board Member McRoberts. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's approved as well. All right, that brings us to our monthly operation update, and I'll turn it over to our deputy chiefs.
Good morning. The first items that I'll talk to is in regards to traffic enforcement that has resulted in impaired driving arrest and some drug charges as well. So you notice in the report, traffic enforcement resulted in a traffic stop where a significant amount of fentanyl was seized by around $17,000. As well, we grabbed an individual doing 108 in a 50. Turns out that person was prohibited driving and impaired as well. So we are doing a significant amount of traffic enforcement, and people will see a lot of that stuff now we'll be commenting on that on our social media. So we're doing a lot of the heavy trucks along X-Mouth along the main corridors. So we're addressing a lot of the community concerns with our traffic enforcement. The next item I'll speak to. Sorry.
Go
Thank you. Sorry. I've noticed also in the county, there's a lot of that VP for under the influence of both. Is there VOPP doing exactly what we're doing, just putting a little more effort into that type of thing? But a lot of car accidents, a lot of drugs and weapons.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the OPP is doing, but certainly I believe because of the the summer months coming, we see an increase in bad driving behaviors, a lot more impaired driving. So I think it's just standardized across police agencies that are doing a lot more traffic enforcement for impaired driving.
And how about those that are from out of town? Or is that like instead of traveling through Sarnia and risking getting caught, you think more rural, you can deliver your drugs from A to B? Could that be part of it?
I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is our impact update. So first half of the year, Impact encountered a total of 818 homeless persons, and of those 246 were unique individuals. And then of course they also encountered 685 persons that are struggling with addiction issues. Of those, 204 were unique. Now that breaks down to most of the people that they were encountering are from the Sarnia area. However, there were 24 from the county, and 29 of them were encountered from outside of the county. So we are seeing still small numbers of people from outside of Sarnia and Renton County coming to Sarnia for whatever issues. What's drawing them here, I personally don't know. You'll notice that there is a chart in the package with regards to the types of referrals that Impact is making. And I'm happy to say that we now have Constable Jordan Armstrong now as part of our Impact unit. He was added and started working as of June 1st. And so we should be seeing more work done with Impact. Also in the operational report, you'll see several investigations done by our uniform members and by our drug unit with support of other units like K9 and VERT. And in those, you'll see again more drugs, guns, ammunition, obviously items that are concerning to us. So we are still seizing firearms. We're effective at doing it. One of the firearm seizures you'll note in the first one, that was also in relation to the shooting we had on First Nations as well. So we did recover a significant amount of cash and firearms. We also, so since August 2024, there was a lot of reported indecent acts that were occurring on the trailways within Sarnia. So early June, actually, Inspector Vosberg was out on patrol and observed a person matching the description of the suspect, and he was subsequently identified and arrested as the offender. He was charged with 6 counts of indecent act. And we're still looking into other crimes to see if there's any other connection to this individual, but that will bring some peace of mind to people walking in the trailways along the Sarnia.
Board Member Phillips.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Chief. This particular incident is close to my heart because I live on the trail, and I'm the first point of contact for a lot of people when they have issues with the trail. And because of the fact that we have so many people using the various aspects of the trail, but now they're using it at different times. So very early in the morning, just at sunrise, and some well past dusk. And that would be like now about 10, 11 o'clock at night, even though people do have their lights on their bicycles, they are on the trail. So it's always an area of concern, and I'm happy to tell people that you are out there, you yourselves are on the bike, going down the trail, because it is an extensive network, and everyone always seems to think that the trail consists of the Howard Watson Nature Trail, but it doesn't. It interconnects with everything else. So it's a lot of area to cover, and I'm glad that you caught this guy. Thank you.
And then in terms of the community engagement, so early this year, our members had a chance to deal with break and enter investigation that involved the Sarnia Imperials Football Club. They had their location broken into and some of their equipment was stolen. So our investigators were able to learn the location of some of the stolen property and return it back to them. So as a result of that investigation, there were some relationships being built, and now we have 3 members of Sarnia Police Service who now are volunteering as coaches with the Sarnia Imperial Football Club. So that was a good opportunity for us to engage with some people in our community, as well as be role models and potentially look at recruiting opportunities too. I would imagine. Also, too, we participated on June 6th in the law enforcement torch run. We had a great turnout, both Halton,
That's okay.
Sarnia. There was corrections were there, CBSA was there, and OPP, and we had a great turnout and nice barbecue at the jail afterwards. You'll note in the package there's pictures of that event. Not subject to any questions. That's the operational updates.
Okay, thank you. I have two items. First, concerning the community engagement, that's very impressive, and I think the Sarnia Police Service has really done a great job making itself available to different community organizations. I know I was yesterday at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Lambton College residents, and there was representation from the Sarnia Police Service, and I think it just strengthens all the relationships in the community. So well done in terms of that. And then my second comment relates to, I'm glad to see that we are apprehending drugs and weapons, but at the same time, I'm concerned to see that we're apprehending these kinds of quantities of drugs and weapons. And I don't know if you have a sense of whether this is an increase from previous years. It's just concerning to me to think that there's those kinds of weapons floating around on our streets.
Yeah. So it probably is an increase, but I think that's not necessarily because we're seeing an increase in the activity. I think we're just doing more enforcement and identifying it. So the problem has always been here, and it's not unique to our community. It's happening in all communities across Ontario and probably Canada. So obviously, it is an important thing, but I can tell you we are seeing a decrease in deaths as a result of opioid addictions or drug poisonings. So that's problems.
Good. Any questions or comments from the board? Board Member Ash?
Not so much a question. I just wanted to recognize that we did have an officer receive a very distinguished award last month, with Jocelyn Paquette receiving Woman of Excellence from Sarnia Community Foundation, which is exceptional. So congratulations to her on behalf of us.
Excellent. Thanks for noting that. All right, so that's the Deputy Chief Van Sickle. Did you have a comment on the, or was it, this was Deputy Chief Hansen's report?
I just comment a little bit on the torch run. We had the opportunity to be at the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police conference, and their charity of choice is the Special Olympics in support of that, which leads into the law enforcement torch run. So there's a couple of events that take place locally here. The torch run is just for awareness. And as the deputy alluded to there, is probably the best attended one that I've been part of since I've been participating in this as a member of the Sarnia Police Service. But that was also echoed by a lot of the other agencies across the province as they were doing a debrief of it yesterday or the day before, sorry. And from there, the Polar Plunge is a actual fundraiser, as well as the partnership with Tim Hortons and the Donut Day. And so again, locally, Jocelyn encouraged us all to participate in that. And across the province, they raised $2.2 million in support of Special Olympics. And so Jocelyn and another member of our organization are going to be going down to Brantford, I believe that it is next month, to participate in the opening ceremonies for the summer games that we're having there. So it's for law enforcement across the province, it's a big deal. And for us locally, we have great participation and support of Special Olympics.
Great. Good. Well, thank you very much. So we'll go to item number 7. So this is our ongoing process for the board to develop policies that align with the Community Safety Policing Act and just best practices. So there's 2 policies up for recommended for approval. The first one relates to financial management and procurement. And I know as a board, we wanted to have some parameters set in terms of, you know, what are the responsibilities of the chief? What are the responsibilities of the board? You know, when is approval required for specific items? So that is a fairly lengthy policy, but I know that we looked at policies from other police services and boards as well, and it seems to align in terms of best practices. And then the second policy is a political activity policy that once again needs to be adopted in some form so that we align with the legislation. So before I ask for a recommendation or a motion, I should say, can I just ask if there's any questions or comments generally about the policies? Board Member Gillis.
Yes, you know, this is my favorite time of year when I get to look at the policies whenever they come up. And this one has been no exception. One thing that I did zero in on was on the fact that we are going to try wherever we can to purchase Canadian. So kudos to that. And the other thing I was very interested in was the cooperative purchasing. And I wasn't aware that we assumed, I guess, that we were, but I thought it would only be amongst police services, but it's broader than that. So am I correct in that? Did I read that right?
There is specifically a police cooperative, and a lot of our purchasing is done through that. But under provincial procurement, we can take part in that too. Plus, we also are in cooperation with the city purchasing.
So we're part of the C-Flag group as well then?
As if the city is, yes, whatever the city where they have cooperative purchasing, we take part in that as well.
Great. Anything we can do to bring down the costs is a good thing. So thank you for that. And I think that was my only one.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, then I'll ask for someone to move the adoption of both policies. So Board Member Ash moves, Board Member McRoberts seconds, and all those in favor? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. So those will get posted on our website with time. And then that brings us to item number 8. That's an information item, but I think a pretty exciting item. So Chief, police vehicle donation to Lambton College.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have had a long and beneficial partnership with Lambton College, certainly we've partnered with the Community Crime Unit and other components. We're seeing a lot of additional recruiting coming from Lambton College as well. I think we've just hired as a constable one of our first original CCU students who was an auxiliary and is now pursuing the road of constable at Ontario Police College. The police vehicle donation, we, as you know, our fleet cycles through, and as we get old vehicles, we replace them with new vehicles that once they are at the end of their life, we dispose of them usually through auction. We have an opportunity here to again partner with Lambton College and donate a vehicle that we would otherwise dispose of as part of their programming that they have there. So for us, I think it's a great opportunity to have Sarnia Police have local visibility with our student population. The cost is relatively minor, and we just wanted to share with the board that this was an opportunity that we would certainly recommend we support and donate the vehicle and continue our successful partnership.
Excellent. Board Member Gillis.
Yes, I noticed when I was reading the policy that this tied into the policy, which did gave my heart just made it sore. The other thing as well was the nice part about having something that someone will actually be utilizing instead of something that may be or similar to, or, you know, my dad's jalopy next to the real thing. This is going to be game changing, I think, for the college themselves as they learn how to handle themselves in these sorts of vehicles, because they're a lot different than the regular car on the road. So this is an excellent option. So thank you.
Yeah, and the vehicle is operational. It's just the sensitive equipment has been removed.
Yeah, we'll remove the sensitive equipment, and there'll be some branding opportunities. It'll be branded as a training vehicle with Lambton College, like collaboratively. And then so they'll know it's a Sarnia Police vehicle, but it won't look like a patrol vehicle. It'll have a different, it's a different purpose.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is that a follow-up?
It could be follow-up, yes. Yes, considering all the problems that have happened in Nova Scotia with regard to police vehicles, particularly RCMP vehicles, how do we mitigate that with this donation?
It would be rebranded. It wouldn't look like a patrol vehicle. It'd be a separate appearance, just like our community crime unit vehicle has a different look to it than
Okay,
similar threads. So you know there's a tie there, but it's not a general patrol.
okay, thank you.
Board Member Roberts.
Thank you. Just to clarify for anyone that's watching this meeting, you didn't just say, hey, we want a new vehicle and we're going to donate this one. What's the criteria for a car being decommissioned?
This is a natural end of life vehicle, so it's end of life. It's got too much mileage. The maintenance costs increase. It's due for cycling out, which would normally mean to an auction where we get a nominal amount for a used vehicle. These are vehicles that are run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're driven pretty hard sometimes. Like this is like it's end of life. So instead of going to auction, we're going to donate it to Lambton College and give it an extension of life in that other purpose. But it doesn't trigger any new. It's regular vehicle fleet maintenance. We're just changing the normal disposal option from auction to donation.
And so just to follow along with Councillor
yeah.
Gillis's, is there a standard in our policies that says if it meets this mileage, if it's had certain damage or whatever, do we have a policy for when we call it end of life, or is that just a cheat call?
Through the chair, we generally cycle them out around 200,000 kilometers or 7 years. It obviously depends on usage, but that's generally get rid of it.
7 years,
Back
7 years is good.
2013, so it's the oldest patrol vehicle.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll move on to item number 9. Deputy Chief, did you want to speak to that, to the ERT authorized rank version?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. What we're requesting with this recommendation report is that we convert an existing constable position within the Sarnia Police Service to a sergeant position. And the reason why we are asking to do that is to just solidify the supervision of the emergency response team, as well as the other areas of the service responsible for critical incident command. So currently, just to step back a little bit, the conversation about the emergency response team has been pretty prevalent with us this year. It initiated with a presentation by Constable Dave Ferreira for the board, just to educate them basically on everything that the capabilities of the team, the equipment that's required. And then jump ahead a couple months, we came and made a significant request for funding for equipment, which was the night vision goggles. I believe that was in April that they were procured. And this is just the next step in the evolution of our emergency response team. I'm careful to call it a containment team because it meets all of the criteria as defined by the Community Safety and Policing Act for a tactical team. And the capabilities of a tactical team far exceed that of a containment team. And I'm happy to say that under the CSPA, we meet all of the training requirements, all of the equipment requirements for our team to be designated as a tactical team. One of the elements of a tactical team is that it needs to deploy a supervisor when the team is operational. And we are able to achieve that using the acting sergeant rank. But what we would like to do is to convert that position to a permanent sergeant position. And what that'll enable us to do is take other areas of the organization responsible for critical incidents, those being negotiators, our drone program, K9, as well as search and rescue, and isolate them into one area. Right now, all of those jobs are done edge of desk. So our crisis negotiator lead is actually our Omgenong officer. The drones are handled through our identification unit. ERT and K9 report directly to me, but are managed through the training branch, and search and rescue is done through me. By having a dedicated supervisor responsible for all of those elements, it brings them all together, and those all should be contained within one unit. So the recommendation from the service to the board is that we convert one constable position to a sergeant position. No change to the head count, a very minimal increase with respect to costing. I believe it was roughly around the $5,000 mark. I worked with Kathy through finance to calculate exactly what that might look like. So it's very, I would say, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but certainly offering us that next level of supervision for an extremely important area of our organization. Subject to other comments by the chief, I'm open to any questions.
Just for clarity, this is a conversion. So this is not an additional headcount request. We're taking a constable position and turning it into a sergeant. So the ask of the board is to take one constable, subtract one from the constable headcount, and then plus one in the sergeant. The current position of team leader for the tactical unit through the collective agreement is already halfway to the sergeant pay rank. So that team leader position, if it's approved to be a full-time sergeant, that's why it's such a fractional increase, because we're already halfway there collectively to pay a constable to be a team leader. If we pay the sergeant, it's only half that increase again. So when we have a confirmed sergeant, it changes supervision. So the definition traditionally of supervision is higher fire discipline. And in this particular case, instead of somebody temporarily in that role, it allows for, as the deputy mentioned, a consolidation of a lot of emergency services under a dedicated supervisor. And it also enables that position now to do a lot more of the oversight, performance management, strategic planning, all those pieces for what is, as Mike mentioned, a fractional increase in terms of cost.
Board Member Gillis.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that theme of the synergies that you're creating and the collaboration that you have between what would have been silos before. And as a result of that, we are getting so much more from each individual than we have ever gotten before. And from my perspective, that is an impetus to do even more. So you see the savings that come, as you say, when you move from one office, one rank to another. In the olden days, when I was a child, I think that would be a phenomenal difference, particularly in pay and responsibility. But now you see that it's just everything, because of the way it's flowing, the way that you have set this up, it isn't a jolt to the system as it would have been in the past. And the difference between a team leader as opposed to a sergeant is significant in the naming of the individual as a sergeant as opposed to a team leader, but it isn't as radical as it would have been before. So that in itself is a wonderful thing to see, but also the fact that we are doing this without increasing the complement of the force, which is again phenomenal. So everyone is doing multiple jobs and doing them very well. So thank you for that.
Board Member McRoberts.
I can just appreciate you're gonna have one individual that can be on call and say, I need this, and know how they work. And it's just one person making that call instead of I've got a contact to get hold of. Yeah,
through the chair.
more efficient, far more efficient and helping the safety of the city.
Through the chair, just to elaborate a little bit on that, you're exactly right. Because even just the equipment that police use and who's looking for what, if I'm gonna buy a shield and the Inspector Fosberg is gonna try to procure a RAM, okay, I know where the shield is, he knows where the RAM is. Neither of us are operational. And so now we're trying to play those games. And when you have one person responsible for everything associated to one part of the organization, it is far more efficient, yes.
And seeing as we're going to shift to a sergeant, is that not going to be great in your plan, your master plan of everybody shifting positions? This person will be there longer. Or they not, they'll have the experience and then somebody below them eventually can.
Part of our sustainability long-term, master plan makes it sound like almost conspiratorial.
Yes.
But yes, it makes total sense from an operational standpoint. It makes sense from an administrative standpoint, and the return on such an incremental change, the investment is multiplied back as a return. So
Excellent.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the leadership development opportunities and succession planning.
Mhm.
It's and I agree. The the efficiencies for the service are great. No implication or no impact really on budget for this year, because I understand that there's salary gaps that cover it, and so this is, and what a fantastic opportunity for Sarnia to have a level 2 tactical team. That's fantastic. So, all right. So I think there's lots of supports here for it, but let's take a vote then. So I'll look for a mover. Is that you?
Kelly?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know who was first. So
Doesn't matter.
Board Member McRoberts moves. Board Member Ash seconds. All those in favor? Okay. That's great. All right. And then that brings us to a highlight for the meeting, our 2026-27 budget. And Chief will begin with the presentation, and then we'll get into the document. Then we'll have some discussion. While the chief is setting it up, I'll just note for the board as well as for the community, the 2024 annual report is now available in hardcover form. So looking forward to having a copy of that.
perfect. Thank you. It's a little bit of an angle here, so.
Okay, so that's it. Let's say 3. So 30%.
All set. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So this is everyone's favorite time of year, budget season. We are a little earlier than we've ever been historically. So this is a good opportunity to go through a few things. The presentation you're about to see is really, it's an introduction to the budget. This is I think it's just in this year, we're going to take a little different perspective on how we budget as a police service. And it's going to be a bit of a longer term view in our approach. For members of the public that watch, and for our audience, we always like to review kind of the budget background, the legislative authorities for the creation of a police budget. The Community Safety and Policing Act came into effect on April 1st. It's similar in that regard to the Police Act that was there prior. And it says that the police service boards shall ensure adequate and effective policing that's provided to the area which they have policing responsibility in accordance with the needs of the population in the area and having regard for the diversity of the population in the area. So that's the mandate of the Police Services Board. And just for clarity, this is the Police Services Board budget. The chief can make recommendations, and then it's the board's decision on what that strategic direction and what's ultimately approved in terms of budgeting. The question always comes up, what is adequate and effective policing? It is defined in the Act. And I think it's important to remember that although when we think of policing, we think always of criminal activity enforcement and catching offenders, that there's a number of different things that police officers are required to do, police services are required to do, and the board is to ensure those services, which includes crime prevention, traditional law enforcement, maintaining public peace, emergency response, as we've talked about our TAC team as an example, assistance to victim of crime, and any other prescribed policing functions. So when we're talking about policing, it is a very broad mandate in terms of what we do in keeping community safety and well-being effective in our areas. From a definitional standpoint, adequate and effective policing does not include the enforcement of municipal bylaws. What that means is police can enforce municipal bylaw, but it's not part of the definition of adequate and effective. So from a requirement of a police service, adequate and effective is the requirement, and then anything additional is optional, essentially, should the board wish or should the police service be able to provide them. And lastly, the mandate of the board under the legislation, again, so the public is aware, the police service board shall ensure that adequate and effective policing is provided for the area which is responsible for, shall ensure that any police facilities, including police lockups used by the board, comply with the prescribed standards, and perform such other duties as are assigned to it or under the Act, including any other prescribed duties. And a municipality that maintains a municipal board, such as Sarnia maintains the Sarnia Police Services Board, shall provide the board with sufficient funding to comply with the Act and regulations. That's essentially the summary. It's available. The links are there if anyone would like to read further into the CSPA, but just so there's some background on those pieces. And what happens with that is the budget, whatever the board approves in terms of the budget, is then submitted to council as an estimate. Then council has the opportunity to review and decide if they approve or don't approve. Council has options. They can return the budget. They can make recommendations for cuts, and then basically the board and the council will have conversation if there's any need for further negotiation or disagreement or resolution. As I mentioned, this budget is going to take a little bit of a longer perspective. So I think it's important for everyone to understand that this budget submission is done in the context of a much longer timeline. And as we approach budgeting, if we're just looking narrowly, like incrementally ahead, we kind of lose sight of the big picture. So I think the story before the board today really is kind of the history of the Sarnia Police, how we got to where we are today and where we're going to go, because the budget is the enabler of whatever that strategic direction is. What you're looking at on the board is from 2003 on the left all the way to 2023 on the right. The blue line is the number of police officers. So if you go left to right, the number of police officers on that flat line was 111 officers. So it was 111 officers from 2003 to roughly 2020. That was unchanged. So for that period of time, no change in terms of authorized staffing. And the gray line is the actual police budget. So what you see is inflationary negotiated increases, steady increase, but no actual change in the number of available resources. And that's what happened over time. At the end is where you see some change happening to the authorized strength, and that was done before my arrival. So there was the Sarnia Police Association successfully negotiated with the board to add 4 over time within this, recognizing that there was a need for additional officers at that time, and that was part of some of those increases that were occurring then. So on May 31st, 2022, I had the privilege of being sworn in as the chief, and this is just how it started. So there's, again, just some context. So when you go outside for the new chief, it's not abnormal, which I suppose I don't know if that's a compliment. I don't know what that is, but it's good to know that it's not abnormal. We had some very controversial budget that year. And just in the history, it's not news to anybody. Every one of this is on a Google search away, but we had some very energized conversations around the police budget in that year. I joke with Chris Cook about that was the first cover of the first Monday there, and it's one of the things that was there was the Save Us from Davis theme. And just so the board knows, I had in my office one day after my first few months of policing, this is one of the things that
I had set up for me, which is, look, how it started was it was a little challenging, but we've certainly come a long way. So that, I will say too, that we always appreciate the public debate. We always appreciate the opportunity to be asked questions and to be able to be accountable and to be able to answer some of those important questions. There's nothing wrong with opposition, because I think everything we need to do, we need to objectively be able to articulate why it's necessary. And I think these types of conversations and these types of public accountability make us better as an organization. Upon arrival in those days, there's been a lot of changes since. Sometimes, even as an organization, we forget to look back at how far we've come, and we need to remind ourselves of the successes that have occurred and the things that have been changed for the positive. And if we look back at some of those pieces, like there was a lot of challenges at the beginning. We had issues with the cells. That very first fall of 2022, we had prisoner custody was probably one of the biggest concerns that collectively the organization had internally, and one of the biggest risks that the organization faced. So part of that big budget at that time was to address some of those urgent needs that couldn't wait. Special constables in the cell area, being able to revamp put plexiglass on our bars that needed to be done. We had issues with the firing range, and I'll even for compliment of the board, like that's the old boardroom that was there for many, many years. And I think if the public isn't aware, over the last couple of years, the board has moved out of the second floor of the building, down here to the community room, where you're now able to view the board meetings online. They're video recorded. The public has access to come to join the meetings now, and it's much more transparent, public, and the information that's available through the board has grown immensely. In the fall of 2022 was the strategic business plan. So if we go back, we did a number of town halls, the board, senior management, members of the Sarnia Police Service, and we listened to the concerns of the public. Again, if you remember, this was a big shift in the Sarnia Police. Like we had a relatively brand new administration. I'm trying to learn, the administration trying to learn what are the needs, what are the priorities, and through the board, what was done through all that public consultation and the public survey and all the town hall feedback and the internal town halls that we held was the creation of the 2023 to 2025 strategic business plan. This is the plan that's driven the budget recommendations, our operational priorities since that time. And you'll note that that is going to expire at the end of this year, and there are plans underway to start the renewal process of the plan. But as the guiding strategic document, there's 4 key areas: operations and neighborhood policing, community engagement and outreach, facilities, equipment and technology, and organizational capacity. So if you go back to that beginning with some of those issues, and this is the new mandate, there's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to be done internally, externally. There's a lot of challenges, and these are some of the things that we need to work through. In addition to that, outside of the building and outside of the organization is a changing world. The operating environment of the Sarnia Police and many other Ontario police agencies has changed. What was considered normal 5 years ago is not the same as it is today. And if we look at the crime severity index, this is over a long period of time on the right. So you can see that from 2003 to 2023, you can see the variations. The blue line is the overall crime severity index. The violent crime is the orange, and the purple, which is harder to see, is the non-violent. The trend line, basically, as you can see, a kind of a 2020, it starts to trend upwards. It is a lot of variation. The CSI is not produced by us; it's produced by Stats Canada. There's an algorithm to do. It's based on a whole bunch of different factors, but it's an independent. One independent measure of how we would look at workload and things that we face, and then just a summary, of course, of where we are. So significant increases in the last couple of years compared to the years prior. Here's another way of looking at what's changed over time, over a long time horizon, again, from 2000 to 2025. So what you're looking at here is the number of occurrences by year. The orange is because this breaks at June. So the entire bar is the year. And then, to be fair, the last year, it hasn't finished yet, 2025, so that's a projection. So you can kind of see that fairly represented. That's as of June 1st. But you can see that since 2015, the number of occurrences has been steadily increasing. And you'll remember from the earlier slide that our historical resources weren't also increasing correspondingly.
This is another operating environment metric. So these are full years. So this is one of the things we don't control is the calls from the public for emergency assistance. So priority one events is what we call those in our CAD system and our dispatch system. So this is a good metric, I think, to be an indicator of how many emergencies are we experiencing over time. So if we look at 2020, we handled 5,537 priority one calls, which was about 15.2 a day. And if we go through 2021, 2022, 2023, you can see that those priority one emergencies are increasing 9,300, 9,400, 10,000 right on the nose. And then in 2024, 10,542. So just as a comparison of emergency calls, we've gone from in 2020, 15.2 priority ones a day to in 2024, 28.9 a day. So that's a significant increase in emergency response. And you can imagine that if it's an emergency, it's not likely to include one officer, it's likely to involve two. And then that's just a call. It doesn't distinguish between a homicide or, some other fight or whatever it might be. Something that can be cleared relatively quickly or something that's going to require a ton of resources to investigate. That's just priority one events. The other thing in an operating environment for a police service that's important to remember is we're a 24/7 organization. So it creates additional challenges in terms of this building never shuts down. It always operates. The prisoner areas always has to function. There's always officers working. There's always dispatchers working. And we have to be able to deal with these fluctuations in workload and manage it over the long term. So we have to look at these pieces when we consider how we assign resources, how we allocate workflows, how we distribute the work through our various units and structures within the organization. So the chart at the bottom is still priority one events, but the yellow is the day shift and the night shift. So even in terms of day or night, the demands are different. These are all considerations when we're talking about budgets and talking about operational planning that we need to consider. Another comparison, so this is the 2020 charges and arrests, traditional police statistics that we often look at. So what this represents in 2020, there were 3,475 criminal code and drug charges laid, which was a 4% decrease from the year before, 2019. There was 2,243 arrests by the Sarnia Police Service, which represented in 2020 a 22% decrease from the year before, which was 2019. If we jump to 2024, we see that those charges have changed. And I'm using them as full years because we're only partway through 2025. So those charges in 2024 are at 5181 for the full year, drug and criminal code only. Doesn't include breach probation, youth, or any other highway traffic act, any of the other pieces. That's a 19% increase for 2023. And then the arrests were 3,682, a 14% increase from 2023. So again, you can see what some of those longer term workload challenges have been. And if we don't look at it over many years, it tends to disappear. So we need to look big picture. If we're talking about some of those numbers, since 2020, those priority one events have increased 24%, criminal charges are up 49%, and arrests have gone up 64%. So the members of the service, the officers, our dispatchers, our support staff, even our custodial staff, and just the volume of workload that's come through and the service has been able to manage this. This is the current state of what we're trying to manage over the long term. Other things that we have to manage in budgets are things that we would never predict. The policing crystal ball is not great. You never know what's going to happen. Things can come up that we just have to adjust. And Rainbow Park, I think, is a classic example of a red ball proverbially that comes down the pipe, and everyone from city, from bylaw to the police, we have to adapt. We have to look at the emerging issue and try to do the best we can with what we have and manage these issues. Very, very challenging circumstance for the residents, very challenging for the police, very challenging for the city, but unanticipated. But we all worked together, and ultimately that was resolved. But it was difficult, I think it's fair to say. These are some of the things that we look at. So in the context of that operational change and in the context of the strategic plan is there to tell the chief what needs to be achieved through the organization. So everything that the service has accomplished is done through the members of the organization. They're the ones that are out there doing these, managing these pieces, and the chief just gets to stand here and talk about it. But the fulfillment of the strategic plan is the objective. So now that we've completed a strategic plan cycle and we've had budget increases that have been much talked about in different sectors of the public conversation, the question really becomes is, have we achieved the strategic plan? Has the money that the taxpayers of Sarnia have entrusted the Sarnia Police with through council, through the board, has it resulted in a return on that investment? So I would like you to look back at over the last couple of years at the achievements of the organization in terms of that, through the support of the board and the city, having some additional resources, what we've been able to do with those resources over that period of time. One of the big things, and I think this is pretty clear to certainly to our friends in the media and to our public, is we have made a very concerted effort to be much more transparent with our activities, with our operations, and everything that we do. The board itself has become much more accessible and much more transparent with the reports and those types of pieces. And the police service, certainly through our media, through our constant releases, through our public outreach, has made a concerted effort to make sure that the public knows what their police service, what our activities are, what we're trying to achieve, why we're trying to do it, because they should build those components. You're seeing here some of the initiatives, the community crime unit. We're not just, it's never been about if we just keep hiring police officers. We don't look at single solutions. We look at efficiencies across the board. The community crime unit is a classic example of no one else has such a thing deployed in the way that we do. We partnered with our local post-secondary institution, had some great results. Our impact team was part of those early budgets before Rainbow Park impact. Can you imagine if we hadn't prepared for that possibility and we didn't have those individuals with those skills ready to go at that time? That unit was one of the best things the board's approved. It was done early on because we could see some of the challenges coming. We had no idea what they would be, but that's an example of where we were preparing for what was an emerging trend at the time, and we're able to much better handle. Impact has done sensational work. We revitalized Amjanong relationship in terms of how we provide service, working with the chief and council there, and being able to try to provide them with the services that they expect, and also be able to build those relationships in their unique environment to meet their unique expectations. We see that we've also reintroduced a canine unit, which the success has grown beyond expectations, resulting in a second dog. We're winning awards, dealing with community issues like the bell. These are all good news stories. I think it's important to recognize the members that are out there day in, day night achieving these types of things. And then, of course, we've never neglected our core duties, which include the enforcement piece. The Sarnia Police Service has been dedicated to address recidivism in terms of the violations of court orders. We've been specifically assertive in how we deal with repeat offenders and those types of issues. We are reactive and to emerging community issues like Laurel Lee, the downtown patrol. These are all things, these are challenging things that we are adaptive in trying to do. So that's the foot patrol, the different project assignments, the integration of our different specialized units. So this is the approach that we're trying to take. Last one is our comm center. We often see the police officer driving around, but when we talk about growing a police service or expanding a police service, every one of those officers driving that car is supported by a number of other people that we don't see. We have to have a dispatcher to dispatch the calls. We have to maintain the building. We have to have fleet facilities. We have to have finance. We have to have human resources. All these things support that officer. If all we did was hire police officers, the organization wouldn't be able to sustain itself. So for every operational person we have to support that person effectively to make sure that they can do the work they need to do. So behind the scenes, our civilian members have done a ton. Our AMHART team has expanded. Our comm center has gone through a tremendous amount of change in how they do business. That's been a long-going project, the big renovation in that room. So far this year, 11,429 CAT events have been generated out of that room. That's not the calls, that's just the ones that turned into events, which is up 13% from last year.
We are continuing to expand our special constable program and looking at different ways to deliver business. Do we need a police officer like we traditionally have, or can we hire a specialized special constable that can do the same job, but perhaps at a more economical way, and then free the police officer up to do the things that only police officers do? So we've looked at a whole bunch of different things, which we've even talked about some during the presentations this morning. The very best summary that I can provide is we did a promotional video, which I'd like to share to the board and our public. This is a great encapsulation of some of the changes in the Sarnia Police Service. You'll see some of the members represented. Certainly it isn't everything that's occurred, but I think it's a good representation of the tremendous amount of work that every person here at the Sarnia Police Service has done to move the needle on a whole bunch of different areas so successfully over the last 3 years.
The Sarnia Police Service has actually been through an incredible amount of organizational change in the last 2 to 3 years. We've restructured internally and we've introduced a number of specialized units, and we've really looked to leverage the people that we have in place. We've taken a look across our organization to say, how can we start to do things a little bit better?
We've expanded the role of our emergency response team. We've modernized their equipment, given them far more training than they've ever had before, and we're utilizing them in a much more effective and efficient way. We've also seen a significant change in our introduction of our K9 program. It's been about 25 years since we've had a dog unit within the Sarnia Police Service.
Using our analytics program, we were able to analyze the different types of calls that we get in a typical day. And from that, we're able to formulate targeted enforcement plans. With the tools, with the equipment, the software, we're better able to analyze the community problem. With that information at our fingertips, we can now respond to those needs much more efficiently, much more effectively.
We implemented what we call the Downtown Patrol Project, where we dedicated a number of officers specifically to walk the beat. And
We have a backup.
The Sarnia Police Service
called the Downtown Patrol Project, where we dedicated a number of officers specifically to walk the beat in downtown Sarnia and to build relationships with the residents and with the business owners that are down there. Another huge component of this is the introduction of the Aamjiwnaang Community Officer, whose sole role is to address the community concerns of the Aamjiwnaang First Nation. We are one of only 2 municipal police forces that have the opportunity to police a First Nation. Over the course of the last couple of years, we are now providing fire dispatch services to all the communities in Lambton County. We've expanded that out to include St. Clair Township. So when you're now calling 911 from anything south of Sarnia, you're going to be having that call answered by somebody locally here within the Sarnia Police Service.
911, do you need police, fire, or ambulance?
Our police service here is a part of the community. They're connected to who we are. They're a part of the fabric of our community. The visibility of the Sarnia Police Service in our community in a friendly and proactive way is a demonstration of how connected they are.
There's a lot of skill here in the Sarnia Police Service, a lot of good talent. I see a lot of technology, different training that we're offering the officers. We're really stepping up, and I think the members are embracing that.
The primary drive, which is also one of the greatest challenges, is just to help people. Whether it's someone who's lost their money to financial fraud or suffered an injury from a violent crime, getting the opportunity to help any of those people is definitely the most satisfying part of this job.
Although the organization is old, it feels as though in the last couple of years, we're starting to blossom.
So when it comes to visions of a police service, I think it's not really about my vision as much as it's about meeting the community expectations. I'd like for the Sarnia Police Services to be an agile organization that can adapt to changing circumstances and be able to meet the needs of our community in a flexible and operationally viable way. And we do that as economically as we can, and with introducing innovation and technology where we can, so that we can be the best police service, providing the best services that we can to the community that we serve.
So that video is available on our website. Apologies for the short interruption there, but if anyone wants to see the full video, sarniapolice.ca, it's right there on the landing page. And can't really
summarize it much better than that. So that kind of gives us a wide view of what brings us to our conversation today, which is the 2025 and 2026 budget recommendation from the Sarnia Police Service to the Sarnia Police Services Board. One of the things I'd like to just address before we start is the policing environment across Ontario is under a tremendous amount of financial pressure and challenge. That's from OPP detachments to municipal services to large GTA services. Police budgets are up across the board, and we're no different than any of those other agencies. In terms of last year, and again, there's always concerns about the police budget. We welcome the accountability piece. We welcome the questions. We're happy to respond to those things. But I think it's also important to add the context of, is this an isolated issue of Sarnia Police, or is this part of a larger perspective where there are challenges that are being faced across the board? And you can see from the 2025 budget as an example, last year was 886, facility excluded, was in comparison with the other organizations, Coburg 14.9, Niagara 15%. Like, these are numbers even higher than our first budget year of 11.5. So just some context of where we sit in terms of our budgeting process. So for this year's budget, again, it's an opportunity for the service, and I think an opportunity for the board, because we've been through 3 very challenging years. We've had a lot of work to do. We've had a lot of catch up to do. We've had a lot of legacy things that we needed to address. It wasn't a matter of just, we could no longer afford to do what we've always done because the operating environment has changed. We had to adapt to the new circumstances, and that was largely achieved over the last 3 years, and it was admittedly quite challenging for everyone involved. We are at the point now where those critical needs are being addressed. We still have some challenges in terms of the facility itself and some other things, but it is what it is. And we are continuing our transition towards sustainable budgeting. This is part of the board's direction to the service. This has always been part of that conversation, and it's certainly something we've worked through a lot of the essentials that we had and necessities that we had to achieve to do that. So with this budget this year, we are proposing for next year an increase of 6.9%, and the following year an increase of 4.89%, which is a return to the historical budgeting of the past. Just as a visual, these are the projected budgets for next year and the year after, subject to the board's deliberation and approvals. But you can see the 2023 budget at 11.53, the 2024 9.89. Then down to 886, 6.9, 4.89. So there is very clearly a downward trend. And that initial budgeting, again, in the long-term perspective, was because it was a big budget because we had big things to resolve. And then each year we continue to work diligently on that and deal with some of those issues. And subject to any questions on the introduction, I can flip to the report and we can go through the actual report itself. If that's agreeable, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, let's proceed, please.
You. Roll down. Okay. So part of the board package is this report. So Kathy's done a tremendous amount of work on this. So thanks to Kathy for all the financials that have gone in the background. I'd like to speak to some of the operational narrative that's at the beginning of the report, so that's good context for those viewers that are viewing the meeting after the fact. So we've talked about a little bit of the background. We've already talked about the strategic business plan. We also need to recognize that as a police.
Sorry, Chief, Board Member Gill has been applied.
Sorry, yes.
First of all, I want to say thank you very much to everyone who put this together. And I found it very refreshing to actually have some input on it before it was put together, because in my previous life 20 years ago, we didn't. I appreciate the fact that you listened to the concerns of the board, the fact that you did adopt a 2-year budget process, which is going to be a really good tool for the city to use, because now what we have going forward is we know what next year's budget will look like, so that the city itself can do different planning as well. So it's an overall very good tool from the larger corporation's perspective. And I know that, well, we may not agree with the numbers right now. Just the fact that we are here and we are discussing this, and you're a long way from where I expected you to be. So I appreciate that, and I just want to let you know that.
Thank you very much. Which is a perfect segue into the City Council strategic plan. One of the things, Sarnia Police Service is a supporter of our city, clearly. We are a municipal partner, and what the activities of the Sarnia Police Service do can support the strategic objectives of the city. The core pillar there that's highlighted is that of community safety and community well-being. Of course, we contribute there, but in terms of the more effective we are as a police service, the more likely we are, in my opinion, to attract outside investment, to attract new residents, to have a broader appeal. So we're part of a much larger team. We recognize that we don't work in isolation, and we want to be able to support the city in their strategic plan as well as a municipal partner, like all the other partners that contribute to that in the different units within the city structure. And that's why that's highlighted as part of the budget considerations. The other aspect, which isn't always visible overtly, are some of these other components that we've highlighted in the inside our budget report, which, by the way, is probably one of the most comprehensive budget reports I think we've done to date. We've continually worked at providing more and more information. So WSIB, I think it's important that we recognize that that is a component of modern policing, that stress injuries are a factor with emergency services, and that is something that we are going to need to continually address, prevent, and work to help people recover. But it also comes at a cost. The WSIB component is a significant budget line, and it needs to be something that we certainly consider. Are we being efficient with the funds? Are we preventing as much as possible those types of components? And that's happening behind the scenes. Collective bargaining is driven not just within our city, it's driven provincially. It's not something we control, and it's something that we have to monitor across the province. Arbitrated agreement in Cornwall will impact Sarnia. So it's not, some of these things are beyond our control, but we consider them. Clearly, through the conversation we've had, some of the other reports, the board knows that we've gone through a significant amount of organizational restructuring in terms of how we allocate work, how we structure our organization, who reports where, behind the scenes workflow pieces. We've also done ongoing reviews of our expenses. So every time we have a subscription, it's reviewed. Do we need it? Do we still need it? Can we change it? Is there a better way to do this? So there's part of it behind the scenes. There's a continuous improvement on the budget. I don't want to be left with the, every year it's you go and make a request and then it just goes into the pile and we just keep doing what we've always done. So there's always looking for an additional drop of lemonade out of the proverbial lemon as we work forward. Cost recoveries, as was mentioned on the video, we do a ton of dispatching now for Langton County. There's cost recovery components for that. Grant funding is one of those areas that is a great benefit to the organization if we get them and if they're sustainable. So one of the challenges around grants is they're great when they come in, but then the question becomes of sustainability. So if you're funding a person, for example, for whatever project is, when that funding expires, how do we fund that position? Because as an employer, we're going to hire someone. Like these are some of the challenges we look at around the grant funding piece. And I know this is part of a much higher conversation with certainly looking at some different grant funding options or maybe revisions in that process with the province and through the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. And of course, we also talk about our expanded revenues. So there have been some decisions made in the organization that have allowed us to recoup some funds specifically from pay duty fees, records checks, those types of things that we do. The police are not a for-profit business. We're an expense. We are a necessary component of municipal life for community safety. We do the best we can to recoup where we can, but it's never going to be a for-profit business. It is what it is. We've broken the 2-year budget down. So in keeping with similar themes, so we can be consistent year over year, we've broken it down into 3 priority areas. We've got our contractual legislated inflationary obligations, which we estimate contractually, we are still without a new collective agreement with the Sarnia Police Service, that the bargaining continues. And so does our budgeting process. So what we have to do as an organization is we have had to look across the province back to where collective agreements are and essentially estimate where we might end up. So part of this budgeting is looking at where we could end up in terms of a collective agreement, which will be reached at some point in time, and then to ensure that we're properly funded for what that is likely to be based on other settlements across the province. In 2026, we have some operational needs that we're looking to address, and I'll speak to those, I'll highlight them right now. We're asking for 3 new positions in 2026. The first 2 positions are the formalization of an existing pilot. So last year, we reallocated 2 special constables from courts to positions into our forensic ident bureau, which is a highly specialized unit which has traditionally been staffed by detective constables. Those 2 forensic trained special constables have attended the Ontario Police College. Both come with extensive educational backgrounds in the field. And that program has been a tremendous success, that pilot. So this is formalizing the placement of 2 special constables, freeing up 2 officers to be redeployed in another location in the organization. So it's been running for a year. Its proof of concept has been established. We're very pleased with the success. This is also part of the civilianization component that other services have also done. I think, I'm pretty sure Chatham-Kent has a similar program with special constables doing forensics. I know St. Thomas was one of the early adopters of this program, and we've leaned heavily on their experiences to start this pilot, and it's worked out very well for us. So the first 2 positions aren't new in the sense of a new concept. It's been running for a year. They're fully trained. If those 2 positions are approved, then it just gives us the ability to backfill the gaps in courts that we had to borrow from to do the pilot. The second position is an second HR person. So we are a 200-person organization. We have 2 collective agreements, 2 bargaining groups that we do now: civilians, Sarnia Police Association uniform agreement, Sarnia Police Association civilian agreement, and the potential one day for possibly a senior officers agreement. So those 3 bargaining units have different labor conditions. Managing absence management is critical. WSIB, LTD, short-term sick, all these components are all HR issues that we're managing internally. Leah needs the help. It's been a tremendous amount of work, and Leah can certainly speak to the needs of HR and what she's experiencing, but that, in my view, is if we want to keep Leah here, which we do, we need to make sure that Leah is properly supported for the workload, because it's untenable at the moment in terms of what's expected and what we want to manage effectively. These are also issues that come at great cost. So people get sick, for example. Like, we're all going to get colds and flus. That's a normal part. Just to give a context of the cost, if we look at the cost of sick as lost time, which we will always have, we'll never eliminate it. But so far this year, the total cost of that is around $350,000. Just sick. That doesn't include LT. It doesn't include WSE. So when we're talking about adding resources to HR, we're talking about adding resources to manage a significant budget consideration line to make it more efficient and to make sure that we're following the collective agreements, that we're helping our people return to work more effectively, that we have timely communication, that all those pieces are occurring behind the scenes. And it is a significant expense line and necessary for an organization that we want to manage better. In 2027, it is the estimated contractual increase, plus addressing some of our right-sizing our budget lines. And by that, I mean, if we have a budget line that always shows red, it means either we're overspending or it means we've under budgeted. So when that line is consistently red, it probably means we've under budgeted. So what we're trying to do over time is correct those to reality. I don't know what other way to say that. We're trying to make the budget reflect the operational reality and have it be just, and that's part of what we're doing. So in 2027, there is 0 request for additional staff. So the formalization of the 2 forensic special constables plus an HR person in 2026, and the 2027, the additional strength ask is. When we talk about some of those budget line risks, like we have a couple of pieces, so we can certainly address any questions on those pieces. We've added a section in there. Reserves, we talked about the Rainbow Park just as an example. Like that was an unexpected thing. We have to have reserves in place to deal with the unexpected. We also use our reserves. The word reserve implies like a piggy bank. That's not entirely accurate. It's more of a cup that we draw from and add into and then try to maintain the level. And what that allows us to do is if there is an expense year that's high, it means that the amount we pour in every year doesn't have to fluctuate. It just means the level's going to drop for temporary and we're going to build it back up over time, if that makes sense. Some of the parts we haven't looked at is WSIB backfill. So some organizations are at a point where they've had to approach the board and ask for funding to hire people to backfill those who aren't. So Sarnia Police Service is not there yet. We actually have, so far, we've done very well in terms of absence management and return to work. We want to continue that with the HR person because some of those risks that other services are facing, we'd like to prevent or avoid if at all possible. So that's some of those components. Other risks include, as I mentioned with the grants, they're not long-term guaranteed, so they could fluctuate up and down. Fees for services can change. Right now, we do a lot of pay duties, and it's possible that those would dry up. As the economy changes, things can change. So we need to be prepared for those components. Technology, I don't think it's any secret to anyone that tech costs are only going up year after year as we become increasingly dependent on technology. Some of these very large companies, they just bill. And we don't have a lot of alternatives. And whatever their subscription costs are, or whatever it is that we have to have, then those are part of those software licensing, some of those other pieces. I will also let the board know that we aren't adopting every technology because we're considering costs. One of the pieces that the Sarnia Police has not gone down the road of is body-worn cameras. It's not the number one reason is the cost. Body-worn cameras themselves aren't expensive, but the behind-the-scenes cost of staff for redaction, for management, storage is hundreds of thousands of dollars. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement that here. However, we are looking at a much more, for us, a much more fiscally responsible alternative, which is the future introduction of in-car cameras, which will give us audio, less redaction. Again, something that I worked on in my past. I understand where those go, but I want the board to understand that some of those components, we're one of the few services that aren't because we are concerned about the cost. Other services that went for early adopters in this are starting to realize the costs and they're managing them as they can, but it would not be sustainable for us. We fiscally could not do that at the moment, but we can find a middle ground, I think, reasonably in some of the in-car camera options, which we're in the process of testing. As Board Member Gillis mentioned, we are finally at a phase where we can start to take a little bit, we're less out of the crisis management in terms of budgeting, and now we can start to look a little longer. This longer budget, the longer we go out, the more risk we have in terms of something random could happen that might affect it, but we're confident in a 2-year, given where we are, that this is a reasonable risk in terms of what we're projecting. And we are looking at the benefits that come from that. As mentioned, it helps the city, it helps us for our long-term planning, it communicates to the organization kind of where the future's coming. Each year isn't a surprise. And we have, it gives us much more stable options in terms of our resource allocations of what we want to do. So with that, it's going to become the Kathy show. So I'll turn this over to Kathy, or I'll work the power screen. Kathy, if you want to go through your parts.
Yeah, so in regards to high-level summary of the 2026-2027 budgets, we're looking at the various high-level components that make it up. Personnel costs is always the highest. So we're seeing for 2026 in particular, of the total 6.9% increase, 6.44% comes from personnel costs. That includes the new positions that we're proposing. I'm sorry, that was an increase of 6.44% over the prior year, and that includes the new positions. Other operating expenditures is a broad category. That's where you see software licensing and technology, those type of things. So we're seeing, and then some of the right sizing that we've included in the budget, some of the adjustments to the budget lines. That's why you're seeing a particularly large increase in both years in those categories. Transfers to reserves, we're looking to build up our reserves to a more sustainable level, especially looking at our 10-year capital needs. So we're building up our reserves. Anything in these budget amounts is not factoring in the new facility. So that wasn't mentioned yet, but that's outside of this presentation. And then on the board expenses, you see that going down. The main reason for that is because we've transferred a large part of the legal budget to operating in order to reflect where the actual costs are happening. They're not board incurred legal costs. They're related to operations. And then finally, revenues. We're adjusting in 2026 primarily for our actuals, just like we adjusted for the budget lines that the expenses that needed to be fixed. We're looking at our actuals. We're saying, okay, we're seeing the trends and making those adjustments. And then we get to net 6.9% for 2026, net 4.89% for 2027.
So board member Gillis suggested that we make some comments, but I think what we want to do is to hear the board. Let's hear the presentation to its completion, and then we'll have a discussion.
Okay, the primary drivers for 2026 and 2027. This goes into a bit more detail. You see the personnel costs, the salaries benefits component. There's some new payroll taxes that we're including in the budget, and then the proposed additional positions. So this is where we see how we get to 6.9%. So personnel costs is 5.82%. Other operational expenditures, even including the right sizing, contributes 1.35% to the overall 6.9%. The reserves another 0.5%, and then revenues is an offset. And then 2027, we have some comments on there too, particularly the budget line adjustments to bring us more in line with reality. That's a 1.24% in 2027. So at the end, 2027, we're at 4.89%. Okay, here we are looking at highlights for the 2026 and 2027 budgets compared with 2023 to 2025 approved budgets. So net operating expenditures, 2026, 38.8 million, 2027, 40.7 million. Year-over-year changes, here's where we again see the decrease from 11.53% in 2023 down to 4.89% proposed for 2027. Expenditures are going up every year. Revenues are going up every year. And the reserve contributions are increasing each year as well as we try to build up to a more healthy reserves levels. And then the personnel costs compared to the budget as a whole, it's staying around 92, 91, 90%. And now we're looking at our authorized personnel from 2023 to 2027. And we can see how we got from an authorized level of 175 in 2023 to proposed 196 in 2026 and 2027. So maybe I'll leave that for questions. You can see there's a line for officers, and then there's a also a breakout of senior command, just to show that that level of senior command has gone up by 1 over the 5-year period. The overall increase in officer or in total staff is 21 over the 5-year period. And then we show our part-time at the bottom. Okay, this is a more drilled down summary of the budgets by revenues and expenditures, the various categories for each. You can go to the next page. It's just a more drilled down category look at the budget. At the end of the report, there is a budget line item summary of the whole budget. Okay, here we're looking at our 10-year capital needs. We've given this in more detail than we normally do. So the first items are facility related. We're including funds with the contingency that we have to repair items in this facility. A new facility would change the projections, I imagine. Equipment, 911 equipment, we're seeing a 10-year look at that. We're building in funds for 911, NG 911 and dispatch equipment every year. On the following page, you can see where we're already building up funds. The fourth line down in 2035 for projected upgrade of the radio system. So in the past, when we had to upgrade the radio system, we went to the city hand in hand for money. Now we're trying to build up the funds so that we don't surprise the city at the end. So we're trying to look ahead to 10 years to what our needs might be. And then we see police equipment and vehicle replacement over a 10-year span of time. Now we're looking at our reserves. Our reserves is the tool that we use to fund our 10-year capital plan. So we have a few different reserves. Each year we put money into the various reserves and kind of almost on a pay-as-you-go basis, we're drawing the money out. But again, it's helping us to even out the impact to the operating budget. We have the operating contingency reserve. That is where our year-end surpluses or shortfalls will be flowed into or taken from. Our 911 equipment reserve helps provide stability for needs that can be unpredictable. Police equipment reserve, this is what we're using for funding police equipment, vehicles, IT equipment. It's a broad range. Building replacement reserve, same thing, we're funding, this should be called building renewal probably, but we're funding major repairs out of that reserve. Our WSIB reserve is new. The city has kind of cut off, segregated the police part of the WSIB contributions into a reserve that we're now managing. So it's a helpful tool, but it's also something else to manage. And then the Police Services Board Discretionary Fund. That's the fund that was created from proceeds from the property group.
Just in case we don't mention it or forget to mention it, the WSB reserve part is new to us. So that's a risk for the service. So we are responsible if we had a large group go off on WSIB, we would draw from that reserve until it's depleted, and then either would have to, well, we probably have to approach the city for additional funding. So having that reserve adequately funded is critical. And it's important to recognize that that is a new piece that's come to us. If we manage our absenteeism well, if we are able to shorten time that people are off and help people return to the workplace through the support of HR, these types of risks are mitigated. They're never eliminated, they're mitigated. So that's part of that component. That's a really big shift. Done in, the city treasurer is great with this. This was a good, I think this is a positive. It lets us manage ourselves, but it also exposes us in isolation to the downside. So just
and then following that, we have a description of the purpose of each reserve, how it works, and then we have a picture of the financial activity over a 3-year period. 2025 is the kind of more or less an actuals or a projection to the end of this year. 2026 and 2027 is proposed. Police operating contingency, we're not forecasting anything to happen in that reserve. That said, if our risk with that one is a major incident, major crime, and it incurs a lot of overtime, that's where we would be looking for the funding. So yeah, that's just noteworthy. Police building renewal, replacement reserve. That reserve had never been realistically funded to be a building replacement reserve. It's more useful tool in terms of funding major repairs in this building. We just were notified yesterday that we have some elevator repairs pending that we have to take care of. So that reserve is used to handle those type of expenses. 911 equipment, that's where we're flowing through our expenses for NG 911, but also our radio communications. So those are all areas of very expensive and unique technology that needed its own reserve. Then the police equipment reserve, we see that it is handling 4 major areas: defensive equipment, police technology, like the technology that goes in the vehicles for like impaired driving detection, drug detection. Then we see IT and systems funded from there, and then also fleet replacement of vehicles. So you see lots of activity in that reserve. We have a forecasted year-end balance increasing from, well, I guess 2026 looks a little precarious, but 2027 we're looking at a bit healthier year-end balance. And then finally, there's the Police Services Board Discretionary Fund is earning interest every month. So, and also new proceeds from property will go in there. And then finally, the WSIB reserve, where we're seeing funds go in and funds go out. And then that's a consolidated projection of reserves. So if we go to at the bottom of that previous page, we're projecting the next page. You can look at the bottom and just view the overall reserve balances at the end of the year. Some of those reserves, like it looks like a lot of money, but some of those reserves, we can't, like the WSIB reserve, that's a special purpose reserve. We can't dip into that to fund equipment needs or other operating pressures. So while the overall total is helpful, each reserve has to be looked at on its own. And then finally, the recommendations is the approval of the 2-year, the approval of both years' operating budgets and the 10-year capital forecast.
With that, Mr. Chair, we'll turn it back to you for any more discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. I will open it up in just a moment. I just want to say that I too appreciate the the extent of the budget document this year. I think 32 pages. A lot of the things that we had asked for in terms of the capital plan have been nicely identified. Also, the concept of a 2-year budget so that we know where we're heading is also, I think, very much appreciated. So I'm going to look to the board for questions. I know Board Member Gillis has some. Do you want to lead us off, Board Member Gillis?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we can make recommendations at this time as to add or delete. Is that what we're seeking?
So at this point, we don't have a motion. We haven't taken a motion yet. So I think we're just going to have some general conversation. So
This would be the time.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, well, what I would like to see us do is I would like to see us decrease the PSP reserve fund by $50,000.
Maybe you could just let us know what page you're on.
Oh, you would ask me that. Oh, he was just up on the board a few minutes ago. That would be on page 66. So you see that line 6390, we have a PSP discretionary fund. So basically what I'm looking for over what I'm talking about is an ability to decrease this budget by about 125,000. Recognizing that won't be a half percentage point, but it'll be close to that. So I would like to see us take money out of the police services fund, discretionary fund. So reduce the amount to the discretionary fund, or take money directly out of that discretionary fund of 50,000, put it into the budget. So you're putting money into, so I'm increasing your revenue. If that makes sense. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So I'll just jump in here. So I think what we would do, we would probably ask the chief. So if we want, so let's start off with the recommendation. So 6.9% for next year. So if we felt that was too high, then I would suggest that we ask the chief, if the amount were to be reduced, where would that reduction take place? And see what,
okay, is that the way you can do that?
Well, and just ask what the staff might suggest. Now, in terms of reducing the amount that's in a reserve, I know the city uses that technique to mitigate the levy increase. I'm not sure that ultimately it doesn't really produce revenue for us, right? Because if there's less money in the reserve, well then
it should go directly back to the operation.
So if I understand you correctly, you're looking to see a reduction in the budget next year of about 125,000.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is how I'm trying to find it.
Okay. So I think so. Let's put that on. Let's put that to the side for a moment. Are there other questions or concerns that you have about the budget that you want to raise?
No, I do see though some ways that we can probably change a couple of numbers to get it to where I think it would probably be a little more palatable than it already is. Not that it wouldn't be palatable now, but 6.9 compared to say 6.5 is 6.5 is my ideal. If I could get it there, I would like to get it to 6. I don't think that's possible, considering the fact that we're looking with not a lot of money. So that's where I'm headed towards. And I may need some help in the actual additions and subtractions to get us to that.
Okay, so I'll ask the chief. Chief, if it was if we were to reduce the budget to 6.4% for next year, so
yeah, 6.5.
or 6.5, pardon me. So shave off about 125,000. You say?
Give or take, it could be close to 150, but somewhere in that regard.
Where do you think that So I take a look at on page 48 and page 49.
Mhm.
So the 5.78 seems to be the contractual legislated and inflationary obligations.
Yes,
So it's really that 1.12% that I think we, we're
Yes.
playing around with.
yes, exactly.
And the two items there are the two civilian special constables, and then the other one being the HR position.
Yes, so I'm not looking to cut from operations. I'm looking to perhaps take a little bit of money off the police services board operational, which is practically nothing, but it's more of a token than anything. Where that money is to increase the revenue that our revenue projections, particularly on the fees for service grants and cost recoveries. So that's where I'm looking to gain. So I'm looking to give you more revenue than you have to work with, as opposed to cutting, except for the police services board, because we are who we are.
All right, so so I know board member Ash had her hand up. Did you want to speak directly to this point, or can we allow the chief to respond first?
I did. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought the discretionary fund was not a line item that we get from the city, but rather the proceeds from any auctions or anything like that. Is that not what the discretionary fund is?
Research.
Yeah, our discretion. Yeah, so we can't, like, cutting 50,000 from that doesn't affect the actual budget.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, but we can't, like, that's not a line item, right? That's not money that we're asking for. That's money that's already there and from proceeds.
Yes, I understand that. But the fact is that it's sitting there making you money. Right now, we need some money.
But we
In order
can't
to
use
get
it for operational. We're not allowed
Is that
to.
true? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I take that off the table.
So the discretionary fund is built up from the sale and proceeds of items from the equipment room.
Mhm.
And we do have, I'm not sure if we have a policy, but we certainly had when we approved it, we had a sense of how those funds could be spent. And I think the legislation says it has to be in the public interest. So we could use those funds, for example, to support a community kind of
A
event.
community initiative.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you very much.
So Chief, did you want to speak to, if 6.9 wasn't what the board was prepared to approve, where would we go?
I just want to give a quick background on just some background of the discretionary fund. So it
Yeah.
looks like a big number. It's important to remember the majority of that flowed from a one-time audit of the property room and the disposal of all kinds of items and cash, and that the act says that it has to go to the board. Like, we just can't absorb it and spend it. It has to go to the board. So that number, although it's big, that is it's not funded from taxpayer dollars in the budgetary sense.
Yeah.
But I would also expect any inflow to that reserve to be much smaller in future years. So subject to the board's discretion on how they wish to dispose of that money, just that's where it comes from, and it's prescribed under the act as we discussed where that goes.
Thank you for that education. So coming back, so I still would like to take a little bit, a nominal fee from the police services board's budget. And I certainly would like to increase the revenue that we're hoping to get. Because we have noticed actually in the Sarnia City budget, we budget X number of dollars to come in and we always exceed that. And I'm expecting that this, instead of it going down, I believe it will go up. So for example, when you said the fees for service, cost recoveries, and now we're looking at actually, I think it was, yes, Deputy Chief Henson was talking about the fact that we've got heavy haul vehicles using the heavy haul corridor without permits. And I would expect that, considering that there's going to be considerable construction being done, particularly in Highway 40, we are going to see that more and more. So I'm anticipating that we're going to get more revenue than we think we are. And that's why I'm bringing that up under the revenues themselves. Even very, very cautious, very, very cautious. I think we can be not as cautious. Put it that way. So I can see that we can increase that revenue line. So those two items are the ones that I really kind of zeroed in on. And of course, I went to the reserve, but that we can't do that. So that's where I am.
And you had mentioned the board budget.
Yes, that's what.
So it's going from 75,000 to 40,000.
Yes, but they're reallocating the legality. So we weren't using that money. It wasn't for us. It was more of a legal, and that's not changing over to, you're taking that over another portfolio, correct?
And you're suggesting that, what would you suggest for that?
As I say, a nominal fee, but 5,000. It may only be a token, but a token it is. So we go down to 35,000. I don't see that what I was speculating on I was working on some of our expenses based on the number of people, et cetera. And I think we can do that quite nicely with that. But I refer back to the finance officer because she knows better than I.
Hey, Chief, did you want to respond?
Just in terms of ticket revenues, that none of that flows to the police service. Anytime we issue a charge or a fine imposed, that money doesn't come back to us. That comes back through the county, back through the city.
Okay.
So there's no direct budget line in terms of, we don't enforce for profit as a police agency. So that's
Yes, but you do get fees for service on various other things.
records checks, clearances, and pay duties.
Yeah.
And that's those are it. The pay duty revenues actually increased over the last 2 years tremendously. So I'd recommend caution in increasing it further, because I would say, and I asked Deputy Vansickle to speak to this, we are having trouble filling them as it is. The service is at saturation in terms of what we can absorb. And as I mentioned before, like the records checks are all nominal.
That's true.
Yeah, accident support services for all the collisions, those revenues are gone. It's a zero cost to us, but it's a loss of revenue as part of the arrangement. So they're just challenging components. Anything we do realize again, taking that longer term view, if we did have a nominal surplus, it would just mean less need to top up reserves in subsequent years. Subject to the board's direction, of course, but I prefer to be at or within budget than over, just perceptually and responsibly. But it's as I mentioned, the board's budget. We're happy to take direction.
So I would suggest, in terms of process, if we don't feel comfortable with the 6.9%, then I would say that we don't approve that. But then we give the direction to the chief and to the finance director to revise the budget and then come back.
That's
right?
a good idea.
Because I don't think what we want to do is we don't want to get too granular in terms of looking at specific lines. Like I would like them to then say, okay.
Well, you know where you know best.
Yeah, like I would like them to take a look at it and say, okay, where can they shave money from the budget? Now they might be able to do that today, but they may need some time to do that. Okay, I'm gonna look. I'd like to hear from the rest of the board. So, Board Member McRoberts and Board Member Ash, do you have comments?
I appreciate your efforts, Councillor Gillis, and I would like to move a motion after Tony speaks to say we reject it. Whatever we are specifically saying, send it back.
Yes, I'd be fine with that.
And just so that we have a sense of, so I heard Board Member Gillis talk about 6.5%. Is that what you're thinking?
6.5 is great. I mean, the number for 2027 is lovely low. So if that came up a couple of digits to even it off, that's
yes,
a
you
little
could
more
do that too.
for
Yes.
2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, Chief.
Through the board, we're working on ad hoc here as we go, but as per Member Gillis's suggestion here, the HR position is critical to us.
Yes.
However, we have the option to defer it if we utilize another vacancy. We're still going to pull from somewhere. So we'd have to reassess if there was another position that we could backfill with part-time, if there was another alignment somewhere. If we deferred that position, we still need it.
Yes.
But if we deferred it, that would put you at 6.5.
But you expressed.
We could still do it, But
Okay.
so, like, this is where this is the
Alright.
budgeting world. Nothing's free. Everything has a cost. So
Yes.
if we defer that, we got to pull it from somewhere else.
Right.
So, which we do all the time. The board knows this, but it just represents risk. If we have some salary gaps, this is no problem. If we have some sort of unpredictable nightmare, then it's a problem, which we would come to the board with, we know, like, early on. And we can try to work within this. Like, the goal here really is to get us to sustainable. And
Yes.
that's the goal. And part of the president, I know the board knows this, and I appreciate all the support the board's done. And I appreciate especially all the challenges that the city is facing currently, and there are many. And we want to do our part as well. We get that. So I think that is something that we would be able to manage, as long as we're going to have to come back to it at some point.
I would, just to follow up on the coming back to it, if that position were reintroduced into the budget in 2027, there would be that extra half there.
Okay, and that's where we, yes, talking about evening
Gonna
it
be,
out.
right, they both
Yes.
not a little higher.
So
I would think.
if possible, like if the board is agreeable, we'd like, it'd be ideal for us if we have a budget approval, because we've never really had a summer in the last 3 years.
So I just want to clarify, so if you defer the position,
Mhm.
you're saying that you would fill it anyway, but you would fill it from other,
We have natural turnover inside the organization. And as a vacancy appears, or we could repurpose that vacancy, we could convert them, but we would have to then use contract work or something to backfill the work. But that's currently funded by salary gaps as we go along, because it takes a year to bring a constable online. So
Right.
like we will always have some of those. We've always historically used them to fill gaps of things that we don't need to bring forward as a capital ask. We can use the proverbial savings and the couch cushions to buy some smaller items.
Right.
And that's what we've done. So in this case, we would bucket that up to make sure we need the HR position. We're going to have to do it. We'll just have to, some other place will have to carry that gap.
so typically, I just did the calculation, I think, to bring it down to 6.5%, that's a savings, I think, of just over $145,000.
And with the 5,000 from the board, that's 150.
If
we agree to that, if the board agrees to that.
yes. So, does that inevitably just come out of, like, you just contribute less money to reserves if you don't have the salary gaps, or where does that come?
Ultimately, that's where that would be the trickle down would end up there.
Like, to me, wouldn't it be better to just simply put 145,000 less in reserves so that we get this position? Because I'm gonna, I'll just
Okay,
make a
all
comment on the budget here, and that is that I can tell you that attendance management is a really, really big thing in organizations across the province. And I think we really need to put some resources there. I'm not saying that the cost of the HR position is going to be recovered in terms of managing attendance, but like we've done very well here in Sarnia, but other services have had a large number of people off. So I mean, I support the attendance management and the second position. So if we were going to reduce, I would say that, and I hate to do it because we need the reserves, but I mean, I think we need the HR position.
If I may, Mr. Chair, we're not arguing about that HR position. We are going to have that HR position. It's where we find the money to support the HR position.
Right. So,
which,
but if we use salary gaps, then we're putting ourselves at risk.
no, I don't think so, because as you're transitioning from one position, or you're bringing on a hire and transitioning to others. So that's going to be a process over the years. So you will have some money to free up to support that position. And I presume, if I am correct, that Chief, you want to have the new HR position ASAP. So not waiting for 2026, but utilizing obviously some monies out of the 2025 budget. Which, am I reading that right?
So that would be a change in count, which would require a separate board.
That's okay. We can do that.
Board Member Gillis, I'm just concerned about process
Yes.
because I would like, you know, we're kind of doing it in the moment. I think if we, you know, if the board's perspective is that they'd like to see a reduction in the budget increase for next year, then I think we should give it back to the staff so that they have time to properly come back and tell us how that's going to work. I'm going to look to Board Member Ash and Board Member Roberts, and then we'll come back to you, Gillis.
Okay, so if we do the suggestion of the HR position with the salary gaps, and at the end of the year, any funds left over, they go into our reserve, correct? Yes, that's what happened?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, so if we fill this position with the salary gaps, it's going to reduce the 2026 budget to 6.5, and then the HR position will carry over, be included in 2027, which would increase 2027 budget to about 5.25,
That's right.
right? Okay, so filling it this way, how many constables are we currently vacant? Whether it's getting into the police college or whatever, do we have vacancies?
We're projecting at strength, 132.
So we're full?
Cadet program and anticipated people on deck. We have every vacancy accounted for with the fall intake. Is that correct, Glenn?
Yeah, as it stands right now through the chair, we are at full complement. There are 2 expected departures that are forecasted over the course of this year, potentially 1 forecasted for next year, which is 3.
So the salary gap's coming from the cadets to constable level. Is that what we're looking at?
We also have civilian positions that we need to fill as we go. So there's a lot of churn. We're a 200 member, almost 200 people full time. Like there's always going to be some gaps, and we use those scraps to fund some of those other pieces.
And will there be enough scraps to cover this position?
The worst case scenario, it hits the reserves, and the reserves either like stay the same or heaven forbid they go the other way. I think that's the concern. I know Kathy has a lot of concern at our reserve levels, and I think I wouldn't be doing her justice to not mention that. Like that is the true concern with all the challenges that we face running the organization. That's where it is. If we could, like, if the board would like us to cut 150, we could certainly find that somewhere, as long as, you know, it's got to come from somewhere. So if that's the reserves, that means that needle doesn't move, or it runs the risk that could drop down further. At some point, though, like it's like it just kicks it down the road.
So just before Board Member McRoberts, I just want to say I feel very uncomfortable approving a position without dedicated funding. I think it's a poor way to proceed with the budget. So if we approve the position, then we need to have the funding for it. And if it's the will of the board to cut, you know, $150,000 in the budget, then I think we give it to the staff to figure out how they're going to do that, rather than attempt to fund a position through salary gaps that may or may not happen. Like it's just not a very good process. So Board Member McRoberts, go ahead.
I believe that maybe we're getting into this too much to the point where these are the professionals. It is their job to know what they're doing, and they decide. And when they come back, this is our request. They meet the request. They know best. And if we think they're making a bad decision on that, to question it, but not to decide for that. So that is not our place necessarily. So I would like to make the motion that we meet that 6.5 and allow the professionals to do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, so we'll put that motion on the table. So we're going to ask the staff to come back with a budget for 6.5%. And do we have a seconder? Board Member Gillis. Just before we vote on it, Chief, from your perspective, is that do you think that can, in terms of process, you could work with the staff and develop a budget that comes in at 6.5 and then come back to us?
Yep, we were happy to take direction with the board, Mr. Chair. And the other question I would have is, through you, is there any concern at the 2027 level that we should be looking at as well, or is that?
So let's, I think what we'll do, so I'll let board member McRoberts speak, and then go ahead. Yeah.
Number one, we thank you, everyone, for getting it to where it was, like that 6.9 from what we've had. Excellent, but if we could just take the notch down, and then we discussed that because the 4.89, I mean, I'm okay with having it level for the next 2 years. I mean, that's predictable, and it'll give you a little smidge more in 2027, will it not? If we put 0.5% onto that.
We could defer, we could take 150 out of 2026 and put it to 2027. And that would be, like that, Kathy just passed a note there through the board. That's a possibility.
I think that would be brilliant, because then it's consistent. Everybody knows what they're looking at. The council will be happy with that.
Yes.
That is
So,
great.
so I think because the staff would come back with a revised budget, at that point, we could see what impact that has on the second year. Because we don't know at this point what that would look like, right? So,
Absolutely.
okay, any other questions or comments on the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, all those against? Sorry, board member Ash, is that for or against?
I was for it. It is, yeah, it's fine. I'm for.
All right, so let me say just before we move on, I really do appreciate the way the budget was laid out. And I think if we can get it down to 6.5, that's going to be even a stronger budget, and in terms of our ability to show the community that we really are trying to be fiscally responsible. So thank you, Board Member Gillis, for raising those points, and the rest of the board. And then in terms of the board's budget of 40,000, we'll, perhaps you could take a look at that and see if 35,000 would be adequate, and we could take that for consideration as well. Okay, all right. That brings us to the new facility update. So just in the spirit of wanting to be transparent with the community and have the community engaged in the planning around the new facility, this is a standing item on our board meeting agendas. And so I can report that since the time that City Council approved the allocation of the 15 acres of land at the east end of Wellington, there have been conversations with the city staff. City staff have provided us with a list of parcels of land that could meet those specifications. And so the chief and I, we've met with the architects, we've met with the city staff to discuss. And so there is a property that we are looking at. We're not prepared to make that public at this point. It would have to be approved by City Council first anyway. But we are looking at a potential property, and we've talked about the types of studies that we would need to do for the property to make sure that it would be adequate for the new facility. So that's coming along quite nicely, and we are hopeful that there will be something before City Council on whether July 21st meeting. Chief, did you want to add anything to that, or did I cover that?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. You did a great job.
Okay. All right. Then that brings us to our open forum. Any items? Any of the board members? Okay, Board Member McRoberts.
I just love all the activity. The downtown officers are making contact with everybody. And although the community still seems to see a lot of action out there, it just means it's increasing, and that the data provided today is proving that. But I see staff, I see police vehicles driving by all the time, and they're not, eating a sandwich and driving. They're actually looking around and paying attention to what's going on around them. And that's wonderful for people that are out in the community to see. They're actually taking what the officers are actually doing. And I hear sirens all the time. So that's a good thing, but everybody's on it, and people are reporting it more often, which is, don't watch it and then go on Facebook and report. Actually call the police and do something about it.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Gillis.
Yes, and I just wanted to address the foot patrol that you have initiated in our last, I don't know if you actually initiated, but you did quite an extensive report, Deputy Chief Van Sickle, correct? Yes, so in the Exmouth Street corridor, there has been some quite a bit of activity that has been reported to me by some of the business owners. And they were not aware that they were part of that because they are on Colburn Road, which is tees off of Exmouth, but it's still within that business community. So I just I told them I would bring it up today. I just wanted to reassure them that yes, they are in that caveat, and I wanted to know that from you whether I was speaking out of turn or is that actually happening.
For you, Mr. Chair, I believe that you sent that concern via email at an earlier time.
I did.
So it was disseminated to the downtown patrol constable, and if I can just, I'm not sure if you know anything about that remote at all. No. So I'll check with Jamie to make sure that it is part, but it was definitely disseminated to him, so I should see him there as well.
So then I would not be speaking out of turn when I speak to other business owners that may not have their address on Exmouth Street, but they tee into or are on the corner with their address being, say, Indian Road or something like that. That yes, indeed, that is your corridor. Am I correct in that?
For you, Mr. Chair, we need to be careful as to define exact boundaries.
I get that.
Because it will just keep growing and growing and growing.
Yes.
The best that I'd like to keep it is generalized to the downtown park, but definitely extending down into the Laurel-Lee area. Like the Laurel-Lee area is an area of concern for us, where they're going to see an increased police presence on a regular basis anywhere, just by fact of the call volumes that are accumulated there. So that's where that assurance can come. That's the best I can do.
Yeah,
To say specifically, because then
I get what you're saying, but I also wanted to extend a compliment that was given to me and therefore to you about an area close to Laurel-Lee, I won't say where, but where there was a lot of activity, a lot of garbage strewn all over the place, which has been a concern for the folks who actually live in the residential area there. And they were thrilled to see that. I believe it was one of the teams that came up and actually basically made everybody pick up everything and clean it up themselves. So that in itself was like something totally new, and people were thrilled. So it comes back to the community policing that we're talking about, initiating action by people that if you've created the problem, it's part of it. You have to be part of the solution. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And just if I can, Mr. Chair, just a further comment on that. As we were sitting here, I saw the bylaw truck pull up, so that would have meant that they were coming to get the radio. So the connection between the police and bylaw, because some of that stuff that you're referencing there may be a bylaw issue. And now that we have a direct line of communication through the police communications network, is you're going to see a lot of more partnerships of working like that. So the areas of concern which you're speaking about, we're going to have the ability to have bylaw come immediately, as opposed to trying to share information through older ways. So the expansion of that partnership is what's going to really benefit those communities that you're speaking of there.
So thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I'll just mention that it's likely we'll reschedule or have an additional board meeting. We'll probably do that online, because I know some people have work commitments. So potentially looking at Thursday, July 10th. If we go with something like that, we'll make sure that public will post it on the website for the public to see as well. And as we look to adjourn this section of the meeting, I'll just mention that in our closed meeting, we'll have an update for HR, but that's really the only item for today. So can I have someone motion that we adjourn to closed? Board Member Gillis moves. Board Member Hatch seconds. All those in favor? Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break and then we'll reconvene. Thanks.
I'm sorry. I was doing so well. And I was.
Welcome back to the open session. There's nothing to report from our closed session. We dealt with an HR report, And in the open, what we'd like to do is we'd like to revisit the issue of the 2026 and 2027 operating and research budgets. So the staff have deliberated and come up with a new proposal. So I'll turn it over to the chief to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to the direction received from the board in the earlier part of the meeting, we've gone back and looked at the direction to move 150,000 from 2026 and move it into 2027. This will occur somewhere within the reserves is where we'll do it. We'll take also the board's direction that we won't involve any position approvals in that movement. So it'll be a reserve adjustment, 150,000 from 2026 to 2027. And then that amends the budget proposal then in 2026 to a 6.5% increase. And the 2027 becomes 5.28.
Okay, and there was a question about the actual board budget line.
Yes, and we can adjust the 5,000 from the board's allocation. So from 50 to 40, from 40 to 35. Okay. And then through the board, we would have to make some adjustments in the fine print. So I would propose through you, Mr. Chair, that we bring you an amended fine print report of all the columns and the charts that reflect this change, and that would be an information report as the budget may be approved here.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion then to, I'll just read it just for the sake of the recording as well, so that we approve the 2026 budget, which is a 6.5% increase, the 2027 budget, which is a 5.28% increase, and that we also approve the 10-year capital forecast. So looking for a mover. Board member Ash moves. Board member McRoberts seconds. Thank you. Any further discussion about this? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, well, congratulations. I think we have a really, really good budget for the next 2 years, and I appreciate the board's participation and in being engaged in the discussion of the various items. And so now that brings us to the adjournment of our open meeting. So looking for a mover and a seconder. Board member Gillis and board member Ash. All those in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
You got caught up in the moment. You got caught up in the moment.
I thought it was back at Mad Canada there. Yeah.